Lauren, I gave you a chance when no one else would. I promoted you, mentored you, treated you like family, and now you're threatening to destroy everything I've built. You saw something you shouldn't have, but instead of coming to me like a reasonable person, you want to run to HR. Amanda has been nothing but professional, and you know how rumors can ruin lives. If you value your job, your reputation, and your standing with the people who matter to you, you'll forget what you think you saw at that cabin. Your mother called me yesterday, concerned about how stressed you've been. She thinks you're overreacting to normal work pressures. I hate to see family get involved in business matters. Don't force my hand, Lauren. I can be generous, but I can also protect what's mine. Keep this quiet and we all win. Speak up, and you'll find yourself very alone. Hi, my name is Lauren Bennett. I am 33 years old. The call ended with a soft click that felt louder than any shout. I sat on the edge of my bed in our suburban Ohio home phone still in my hand, staring at the blank screen. My chest felt tight, like someone had pulled the air out of the room and left only the echo of his words. Michael Reynolds had been my boss for 5 years. He had hired me when I was 28 and desperate for steady work after a layoff. He had praised my attention to detail in meetings, given me the project lead role that let me finally stop living paycheck to paycheck. I had believed the version of him that smiled at company picnics and asked about my husband David's contracting business like he genuinely cared. But the version on the phone was different. Colder. Calculated. He knew exactly what I had seen 2 days earlier at the family cabin, and he was already working to make sure no one else would believe me. I had gone up to the cabin early on that Friday to get it ready for the surprise visit from my distant cousin Rachel. My mother Carol had mentioned Rachel was passing through Ohio and wanted to see everyone, so my sister Megan and I had planned a long weekend there with our families. David was still at a job site, so I drove up alone Thursday night. The cabin sat on a quiet lake about an hour from our house in the suburbs. It was nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom place my parents had bought years ago for weekends away from the city noise. I had spent the evening sweeping the porch and stocking the fridge, enjoying the quiet. The next morning, I took a walk along the trail that ran behind the neighboring properties. That was when I saw the black SUV parked behind the old boathouse 2 lots over. I recognized it immediately. Michael drove the same model. At first, I thought maybe he had rented a place nearby for a work retreat. Then I saw Amanda Foster, our HR manager, step out onto the small deck. She was wearing one of Michael's flannel shirts, the sleeves rolled up, her hair loose instead of in the tight bun she wore at the office. Michael came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and kissed the side of her neck. It was not a friendly kiss. It was the kind of kiss that had been happening for a long time. I froze behind a stand of pine trees, my phone already in my hand. I took 3 photos before I even thought about it. The angle was clear enough to show both their faces. Amanda leaned back into him and laughed at something he whispered. The sound carried across the water in the morning quiet. I stayed there for maybe 10 minutes, heart hammering, until they went back inside. Then I walked back to our cabin on shaky legs and sat on the porch steps until I could breathe normally again. I did not tell anyone that weekend. Rachel arrived Saturday afternoon with her easy smile and stories about her life out west. My mother fussed over the food. Megan and her husband argued playfully about whose turn it was to grill, and the kids ran around the yard. I smiled in past plates and laughed at the right moments, but every time my phone buzzed, I felt a jolt. On Sunday evening, while everyone was packing up, a notification popped up from the family group chat. It was a photo Michael had sent to the chat even though he was not usually in it. The photo showed him and Amanda standing in front of a conference center in Columbus, both in business attire, with the caption, "Great strategy session this weekend. Team bonding at its best." The timestamp on the photo was from Friday afternoon, the same time I had seen them at the lake. My stomach dropped. He was already building the cover story. When I got home Sunday night, I could not sleep. I kept seeing the way Amanda had leaned into him. I kept hearing the easy laugh that sounded nothing like the clipped professional tone she used in HR meetings. Monday morning, I went into the office early and pulled the expense reports from the last 6 months. Small things stood out now that I was looking. Reimbursements for client dinners that had no client names attached. A hotel charge in a town 2 hours away, labeled as a training seminar. Amanda's name on several of the approvals. I copied what I could onto a flash drive and put it in my desk drawer. That was when Michael called me into his office and gave me the speech about loyalty and generosity. The same speech he had just repeated on the phone. I did not go to HR. Not yet. Amanda was HR. I knew how that would end. Instead, I called my mother that evening. I kept it light at first, asking how the drive home had been. Then I told her I had seen something at the cabin that bothered me. I did not say affair. I said it looked like Michael and Amanda were spending personal time together when they were supposed to be at a work event. My mother was quiet for a long moment. "Lauren, honey, Michael has always been good to you," she said finally. "He gave you that promotion when you really needed it. Are you sure you're not reading too much into a friendly weekend away?" I felt the ground shift under me. She had already talked to him. The next day, my sister Megan texted me. "Mom says you're stressed about work again. Maybe take a few days off. Michael told her you've been missing deadlines." I had not missed a single deadline in 5 years. That was how it started. Quietly. One phone call at a time. One concerned text. One small rewriting of the story until I sounded like the problem. I did not confront Michael again right away. I kept my head down at work and watched. Amanda started scheduling meetings that excluded me from projects I had led for months. My access to certain budget files disappeared. When I asked the IT guy about it, he looked uncomfortable and said it was above his pay grade. 2 weeks later, Rachel called me out of the blue. She had stayed an extra day in Ohio and wanted to meet for coffee before she flew home. We met at a small place near my house. She looked tired, but determined. "I wasn't going to say anything," she said after we ordered. "But your mom mentioned you were having a hard time at work." I remembered something from a long time ago. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was an old photograph, the kind with the white border from Drugstore Developing. It showed a much younger Michael standing next to a woman I did not recognize, both of them laughing in front of what looked like a resort. On the back, in faded blue ink, someone had written, "He told me I was the only one who understood him. Then he took the promotion I earned and made sure I left. Don't let him do it to you, too. E." Rachel watched my face. That was my Aunt Ellen. She worked for him about 12 years ago. She never talked about it much, but she kept that picture. I found it when I was cleaning out her things last year. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This was not new. This was a pattern. I thanked Rachel and drove home with the photo in my purse. That night I sat at the kitchen table and looked at it under the light. The handwriting was careful, almost gentle. The warning was clear. The next morning I went to see Eleanor Henderson, the older woman who lived in the house next to the cabin. She had waved at me from her porch on Sunday when I was leaving. I brought her a plate of cookies I had baked as an excuse and asked if she had seen anyone around the boathouse that weekend. Eleanor studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I saw that black SUV. And the woman, she was with the man who owns the company you work for, wasn't she? I recognized him from the time he came up with you and your family last summer." She paused. They didn't look like colleagues. I almost called the police because I thought maybe someone was trespassing, but then I saw how they were acting and figured it was none of my business. I'm sorry if that was the wrong call. I told her it was not her fault. She gave me her number and said to call if I needed anything. That was the moment I decided I could not keep carrying this alone. I started documenting everything. The expense reports, the changed meeting schedules, the texts from my mother and sister that echoed Michael's language almost word for word. I backed up my work files on a personal drive. I wrote down dates and times of every strange interaction. I did not know yet what I was going to do with it, but I needed to have it. Michael kept the pressure steady but never direct enough to be obvious. He would stop by my desk and ask in a loud, friendly voice how I was holding up. He would mention in team meetings that some people needed to remember where their opportunities came from. Amanda started giving me feedback in writing that was suddenly full of vague criticisms about collaboration and attitude. My mother stopped inviting me to Sunday dinners. When I asked why, she said it was just a quiet weekend and I should rest. Megan posted photos from a family barbecue I had not been told about. In one of them, Michael was standing next to my mother, both of them smiling at the camera. The group chat notification came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was from the family thread. A message from my mother. Michael says Lauren has been under a lot of stress at work. We're all worried about her. Maybe we should give her some space for a while. No one replied for hours. Then Megan wrote, "Agreed. She'll reach out when she's ready." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. They had removed me from the conversation without saying it outright. My voice was simply gone from the thread. I drove to the cabin that weekend alone. I needed to think without David hovering with worried eyes or the house feeling too small. I walked the trail again and stood where I had taken the photos. The boathouse was empty now. The lake was still. I sat on a fallen log and let myself feel the full weight of what was happening. Michael had not just asked me to stay silent. He had started rewriting my life to the people who mattered most to me. He had used the very generosity he claimed to have shown me as the reason I should be grateful enough to lie. And it was working. When I got back to the car, my phone rang. It was Eleanor Henderson. "I saw your car," she said. "I thought you might want to know. That black SUV was back last night. Different woman this time. Younger. I wrote down the license plate if you want it." I wrote it down. Then I drove home and added it to the folder I kept in the bottom drawer of my desk. The weeks that followed felt like walking on a floor that kept tilting. I went to work. I did my job. I smiled when I had to. But every conversation with my mother or sister felt like navigating a minefield they did not even know was there. They had absorbed Michael's version so completely that when I tried to push back gently, they looked at me with genuine concern, like I was the one losing my grip. David noticed the change in me before anyone else. One night after dinner, he asked what was really going on. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, then said the thing I had been afraid to say out loud. "You don't have to stay there. We can figure out the money." I wanted to believe him. But I also knew what walking away would cost. Not just the paycheck. The story Michael was already planting would spread faster if I left under a cloud. My family would hear I had quit without notice or had a breakdown. The version where I was the unstable one would be the only one they knew. I kept going for another month. I gathered more. I found the pattern in the reimbursements. I found the hotel in Gatlinburg that matched a weekend Amanda had worked from home. I even found an old email chain where Michael had recommended Amanda for a raise, right after a particularly large client entertainment charge. Then Rachel called again. She had talked to her aunt's old coworker. The woman still lived in Ohio. She agreed to meet me. We met at a diner halfway between our houses. She was in her 50s, with the tired eyes of someone who had carried something heavy for a long time. She did not want her name used. She just wanted me to know she had seen it before. "He does the same thing every time," she said. "Finds someone who needs the job, makes them feel special, then uses that debt to keep them quiet. When they finally push back, he makes sure everyone around them thinks they're the problem. My sister lost her whole circle of friends because of him. I'm not letting it happen again if I can help it." She gave me a copy of an old complaint she had filed with the company's board years ago. It had gone nowhere. The signature at the bottom was faded but legible. It was dated 11 years earlier. I went home and added it to the folder. Then I sat on the back steps and cried for the first time since the cabin. Not loud, just quiet, exhausted tears that felt like they had been waiting a long time. The next day, I made an appointment with an employment lawyer. I did not know yet if I would file anything. I just needed to understand my options. The lawyer listened to the whole story, looked through the documents, and told me the truth I had already suspected. "You have a strong case for constructive discharge, and possibly retaliation," she said. "But these cases are long and ugly. Even if you win, the relationships you lose along the way don't come back." I nodded. I already knew. That night, I told David I was going to quit. He did not argue. He just held my hand across the table and said we would be okay. I wrote my resignation letter the next morning. I kept it short and factual. No accusations. Just 2 weeks' notice and a thank you for the opportunities. I sent it to Michael and Amanda at the same time. Michael called within the hour. His voice was smooth again. The generous boss back in place. "Lauren, let's not be hasty. We can work this out. Come in and we'll talk." "I've already decided," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I'll finish out the 2 weeks and hand everything over." There was a pause. Then the edge came back. "You're making a mistake. People will talk. Your family already thinks you're struggling. Walking out like this will only make it worse." I looked at the folder on my desk. The photos, the expense reports, the old complaint, the license plate Eleanor had given me, the note on the back of the photograph Rachel had brought. "Maybe," I said, "but I'd rather lose the invitations than keep lying to myself about who you are." I hung up before he could answer. The 2 weeks were quiet. Amanda avoided me. Michael stayed in his office. On my last day, I packed the few personal things from my desk into a box and walked out without saying goodbye to anyone. No one stopped me. In the months that followed, the invitations stopped coming. My mother called less. Megan's texts became short and infrequent. When I did see them at holidays, the conversations stayed on safe topics. No one asked about work. No one mentioned Michael. It was as if the version of me they had been given had quietly replaced the real one. I found a new job at a larger company across town. The pay was similar. The work was fine. I did not talk about my old boss. I did not have to. Sometimes I still drive past the old office building. I do not stop. I just look at the windows and remember how easy it had been for one man to rewrite my story to the people I loved most. How carefully he had used the very help he had given me as the reason I should stay silent. The truth did come out eventually. Eleanor Henderson ended up testifying in a deposition when another former employee filed a complaint. The old photograph and the note made their way to the board. Michael left the company 6 months after I did. Amanda was let go quietly a few weeks later. I heard about it from a former colleague who still texted me sometimes. I did not feel triumphant when I heard. I felt tired and strangely light. My mother still calls on my birthday. Megan still sends holiday cards. But the automatic invitations to every family gathering never came back. I stopped expecting them. I started making my own plans instead. David and I took a trip to the cabin last fall, just the two of us. We sat on the porch and watched the leaves turn. I did not walk the trail behind the boathouse. There was nothing left there I needed to see. I am still figuring out what my life looks like without the version of myself that kept trying to be grateful enough to stay small. Some days it feels like freedom. Some days it just feels quiet. But it is mine. And that is enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If any part of it felt familiar, I hope it reminded you that you do not have to keep carrying someone else's version of your life. Comment "healing" if this helped, and tell me what you would have done when the invitations stopped coming. The morning after I sent the resignation email, I woke up to the sound of rain on the roof and the realization that I had 2 weeks left in a place that no longer felt like mine. I went through the motions of getting ready, but every step felt like I was already halfway out the door. David kissed me goodbye at the kitchen counter and told me to call if anything happened. I nodded and drove to the office with the folder of documents locked in my glove compartment just in case. Michael did not waste time. On the 3rd day of my notice period, he appeared at my desk after most of the team had gone home. He leaned against the partition like we were old friends catching up. "2 weeks is generous of you, Lauren," he said, voice low and warm in that familiar way that used to make me feel seen. "Most people in your situation would have just walked, but I want you to know the door is still open if you reconsider. We can forget the misunderstanding at the cabin. Amanda and I have already moved past it." I kept my hands flat on the desk so he would not see them shake. "There's no misunderstanding, Michael, and I'm not reconsidering." He smiled the same smile he used in meetings when he wanted everyone to feel included. Your family seems to agree that you're making this harder than it needs to be. Your mother mentioned you've always been sensitive to stress. Maybe this is for the best." The words landed exactly where he wanted them to. I felt the old flicker of doubt for half a second before I pushed it down hard. If that's how they feel, they can tell me themselves. He left without another word. That was the last time we spoke alone. Amanda was colder. She scheduled a mandatory exit interview for my final Friday and spent 20 minutes reading from a script about company policy and wishing me well in future endeavors. When I asked if she had anything personal to add, she looked at me with flat eyes and said, "I think we've both said enough." On my last day, I packed the box with my coffee mug and the small plant David had given me when I got the promotion. No one came over to say goodbye. The IT guy, Tom, revoked my access at exactly 4:55 p.m. and avoided looking at me while he did it. I walked out to the parking lot with the box under one arm and the folder still in my bag. That evening, Eleanor Henderson texted me first. "Heard through the grapevine you left. If you need a written statement about what I saw at the lake, I have no problem giving it. Some things shouldn't stay hidden." I stared at the message for a long time before I replied. It was the first time anyone outside my immediate circle had offered to stand with me without being asked. The weeks after I left felt like learning how to stand without a hand on my back. I updated my resume and started interviewing. By the end of the month, I had accepted a senior project coordinator role at a larger firm across town. The pay was comparable. The office was bigger and louder. No one there knew Michael Reynolds or Amanda Foster, and no one asked why I had left my previous job. But the silence from my family grew louder the longer it lasted. My mother called once during my notice period. She asked how work was going, in the same careful voice she used when she was worried one of us was sick. When I told her I had given notice, she was quiet for several seconds. "Michael called me," she said finally. "He's concerned about you. He said you've been under a lot of pressure and might be seeing things that aren't there." I closed my eyes and pressed the phone harder against my ear. "Mom, he was having an affair with Amanda. I saw them. I have proof." "Lauren, that's a very serious thing to say about someone who has been good to this family. He helped your father with that contractor issue 2 years ago, when no one else would return his calls. Are you sure you're not letting stress turn something ordinary into something bigger?" The generosity line again, coming from my own mother this time. I felt something small and important shift inside my chest. "I'm sure," I said. "And if you want to believe him over me, that's your choice. But I won't be at any family events where he's invited. I can't keep pretending." She did not argue. She just said she thought I needed some space to sort through whatever this was. Then she hung up. Megan texted 2 days later. "Mom says you're setting boundaries now. I don't understand why you're punishing the whole family for something that happened at your job." I read the message 3 times before I put the phone down without answering. There was nothing I could say that would not be turned into more proof that I was the problem. Rachel called the following week. She had spoken again with Susan Graves, the woman who had worked with Michael years earlier. Susan wanted to meet one more time. We sat at the same diner. Susan slid another folder across the table. Inside were printed emails from an old internal complaint, a copy of a statement her Aunt Ellen had written but never sent, and a short list of names of other women who had left the company under similar circumstances. "He does the same thing every time," Susan said. "Finds someone who needs the job, makes them feel chosen, then uses that debt to keep them quiet. When they finally push back, he rewrites the story so everyone around them thinks they're unstable or ungrateful. Your cousin told me you were the latest. I figured you deserved to know it wasn't just in your head." I took the folder home and added it to the drawer. That night I sat at the kitchen table with David and showed him everything. The cabin photos, the expense reports, Eleanor's license plate note, the old photograph with Ellen's warning on the back, the buried complaint, the list of names. David looked through it all without speaking. When he was done, he reached across the table and took both of my hands. "You don't have to do anything with this if you don't want to," he said. "But you also don't have to keep protecting people who are willing to let you be the villain in their story." I nodded. I already knew. A month after I started the new job, Claire Donovan, An old coworker who still texted me sometimes sent an update. Amanda had filed for divorce. The rumor was that her husband Mark had found messages and confronted her. Then Claire said the board had quietly opened an internal review after another former employee came forward with documentation. Michael's name was in the review materials. I read the text twice. Then I put the phone down and went for a walk around the block. The truth was moving on its own now. I did not need to push it. Eleanor Henderson kept calling every few weeks. Once she drove down for lunch and brought a pie from the cabin area. She did not ask about my family. She just listened when I needed to talk and told stories about the loons coming back to the lake in spring. Her steady presence became one of the few things that did not feel like it might disappear if I said the wrong thing. In early spring, I drove up to the cabin alone for a weekend. David had a big job and could not come. I needed the quiet. On the second evening, I walked the trail behind the boathouse. The trees were starting to bud. The water was still cold, but the air smelled like new growth. I stood where I had taken the photos months earlier and realized the tightness in my chest was gone. When I got back to the car, my phone showed a missed call from my mother. She had left a short voicemail asking if I was coming to Megan's daughter's birthday party in 2 weeks. She did not mention Michael, but I knew he would be there. He always was. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and listened to the message twice. Then I called her back. "I'm not coming," I said when she answered. I meant what I said about not being at events where Michael is invited. There was a long pause. "Lauren, this is getting ridiculous. He's been part of this family's life for years. You're the one who left your job. You're the one making accusations. Maybe it's time you considered that you might be wrong." The words were gentle. That made them hurt more. "I'm not wrong," I said, "and I'm not coming." She did not argue. She just said she hoped I would change my mind before the party. Then she hung up. The invitation never came. Megan did not text about it. The group chat stayed silent on my end. That was how the automatic invitations ended. Not with a big fight. Just with quiet removal, one gathering at a time. I did not try to force my way back in. I sent a gift for my niece and a card. That was all. David and I spent the day of the party at the cabin instead, just the two of us. We fixed the loose porch board and grilled burgers and watched the sun go down over the water. It was smaller than the old family weekends, but it was honest. Eleanor came up the next morning with coffee and stayed for a few hours. Rachel texted that she might drive through in the summer. The circle was smaller now, but the people in it had chosen to be there without being asked to lie. I still had days when the silence from my mother and sister felt like a hole in the middle of my chest. I still sometimes caught myself reaching for my phone to tell them something before I remembered I could not. But the hole did not grow. It stayed the same size, and I learned how to carry it without letting it tip me over. The truth had done what it always does. It had waited, then surfaced when enough people stopped covering it. Michael was gone from the company. Amanda was gone. The story he had tried to write about me had not held everywhere. I had paid for that truth with the automatic place I used to have at every family table. Some mornings I still woke up missing the version of my life where I had not known how easy it was for one person to rewrite me to the people I loved. But I did not miss the version of myself who had stayed quiet to keep it. That version was gone. The woman who remained was quieter in some ways and stronger in others. She knew how to walk away from a table that required her to lie in order to stay. She knew how to build something smaller and truer instead. And on the mornings when the cabin was quiet and the lake was still, that was enough. The mornings at the cabin had started to feel like enough, but the work of living with the choice I had made was still unfolding in the quiet spaces of ordinary days. I kept showing up. For the new job, kept making Sunday dinners with David, kept answering Eleanor Henderson's occasional calls with the same steady voice I was learning to trust again. Some mornings I still reached for my phone out of habit, wanting to tell my mother about a small win at work or ask Megan how the kids were doing. The habit took longer to die than the relationship had. David noticed the pauses. One evening in early summer, he found me standing at the kitchen sink with my hands in the dishwater long after the plates were clean. He came up behind me and rested his chin on my shoulder without saying anything at first. "You're thinking about them again," he said. I nodded. Mom texted this morning. She said Megan's daughter asked why I wasn't at the last birthday party. She told her I was busy with work. David was quiet for a moment. "What did you say back?" "Nothing yet." I pulled the plug and watched the water drain. I don't know what to say that won't sound like I'm asking for something they've already decided not to give. He turned me gently so I was facing him. "You don't have to say anything. You already chose. The rest is them choosing what they're willing to believe." The words landed with the same quiet clarity I had felt at the cabin. I leaned into him and let myself be held for a minute before I answered the text with a short, careful reply that changed nothing. Later that week, Claire Donovan texted me an update from the old office. She said the internal review had wrapped up quietly. Michael was gone. Amanda was gone. A new HR director had been brought in from outside. Claire also mentioned that Amanda's husband, Mark Foster, had filed his own complaint as part of the divorce proceedings. He had apparently found messages and financial trails that lined up with some of the things I had documented. Claire wrote, "Mark asked if anyone still had your contact info. I didn't give it to him. Figured that was your call." I read the message twice. Then I deleted it without replying. I did not need to hear from Mark Foster. The truth had its own momentum now. It did not require me to keep feeding it. Patricia Hale called a few days later. She had kept a loose eye on the situation after our last conversation. The company settled with 2 of the earlier complainants, she said. Quietly. "Your documentation was referenced in the review materials, even though you never filed." Eleanor Henderson's statement carried weight. She was very clear about the dates and what she saw. I thanked her and told her I was done with all of it. She understood. We hung up without promises to stay in touch. Susan Graves sent one final email through Rachel. It contained a scanned copy of the letter her Aunt Ellen had written years earlier, but never mailed. The letter ended with the same sentence that had been on the back of the old photograph. "Don't let him do it to you, too." Susan wrote only one line in her own email. "You didn't." I printed the letter and added it to the folder in the drawer. Then I closed the drawer and did not open it again for a long time. The summer passed in smaller rhythms. David and I hosted a modest gathering at the cabin in July. Eleanor came with a pie and stayed 2 nights. Rachel drove up from out of state and brought her partner. Claire Donovan came for an afternoon with her husband and left before dark. No one asked me to explain what had happened at my old job. No one treated me like I was fragile or difficult. The weekend was ordinary in the best way conversation that did not require translation or careful editing. My mother sent a birthday card in August. It was the first real mail I had received from her in months. Inside was a short note that said she hoped I was well and that the family missed seeing me. She did not mention Michael. She did not ask me to come to anything. I read it twice, then put it in the same drawer with the folder and did not answer. Megan never texted again after the birthday party message. The silence settled into something I could carry without it pressing on my lungs every day. Some weeks I still felt the absence, like a missing tooth, constant but no longer sharp. Other weeks I barely noticed it, until something small reminded me, like seeing a mother and daughter laughing in a grocery store aisle, or hearing a voice that sounded like my sister's in a crowd. I kept choosing the boundary anyway, not because it felt good, because it was the only way I could keep hearing my own voice clearly. One afternoon in late September, I drove up to the cabin alone. The leaves were just starting to turn. I walked the trail behind the boathouse one more time. The boathouse was still empty. The water was calm. I stood in the same spot where I had taken the photos and let myself remember the exact feeling of that morning. The shock, the nausea, the certainty that I could not unknow what I had seen. Then I let the memory go. On the drive home, I realized something had shifted for good. I no longer felt responsible for protecting other people from the truth about Michael Reynolds. I no longer felt like I owed anyone gratitude that required me to lie. The generosity he had used as a weapon had lost its power the moment I stopped accepting the debt. The cost was real. I had lost the automatic place at family tables. I had lost the easy rhythm of group chats and shared holidays. I had lost the version of myself who believed that staying quiet was the same thing as keeping the peace. Those losses sat beside me in the car on the drive home, but they did not drive. What remained was quieter and smaller and entirely mine. A job I liked well enough. A marriage that had held steady through the worst of it. A handful of people, David, Eleanor, Rachel, Claire, who had chosen to stand with me without being asked to rewrite anything. A cabin that still felt like a place I could go when I needed to remember who I was, without anyone else's story layered over it. That was the renewed sense of self I had been moving toward without naming it. Not triumph, not revenge, just the steady ability to look at my own life and recognize it as mine again. The facades had crumbled, exactly as they always do. Slowly at first, then all at once, when enough people stopped holding them up. Michael's version of events had not survived contact with the photographs, the expense records, Eleanor's clear statement, the buried complaints, and the quiet persistence of women who had decided they were done being rewritten. I had not needed to force any of it into the light. I had only needed to stop covering it with my own silence. On the mornings when the cabin is quiet and the lake is still, I sit on the porch with coffee and let that truth settle. It does not fix what was lost. It does not bring back the invitations or the easy conversations with my mother and sister. But it confirms something I can carry forward. I chose myself when the cost was real, and I can keep choosing myself now that the cost has become ordinary. That choice is the only inheritance I need from any of this. Thank you for listening to my story all the way through. If you have ever had to set a boundary that cost you people you loved, I see you. The quiet on the other side is not always peaceful at first, but it belongs to you. Comment healing if this helped, and tell me what you are protecting in your own life right now by choosing to walk away.